Hey guys, welcome back. It's Lucky here, and today we're going to be going over the Solo Magicka Templar. The Magicka Templar is a fantastic solo class. It's maybe one of the best, maybe the best. I don't know. It depends who you ask and how they feel, but it's definitely up there towards the top. If you like soloing and you like solo content, this is a great class for you. Also incredible for group content. Don't get me wrong. It's a good class for brand new players to play and veterans to play. You know, it's one of those classes that's just good from the beginning all the way till the end. All right, now let's dive into the build. We changed a few things here and there to take advantage of some skills that Zoss has buffed and get rid of some things that Zoss has nerfed. So it's going to look a little bit different, but also feel very familiar if you've been following this build before. In this guide, I'm going to go over everything that you need to know to put the build together. And there's a link down in the description below for the written version of this guide, where you can see all of the gear, the enchantments, and the traits and everything kind of listed out nice and easy for you to see there. So definitely maybe peek at that while you're listening to this, so you're kind of learning how to play the build and putting the build together at the same time. All right, for the race, we're going to go with either High Elf, Breton, Khajiit, or Dark Elf. Breton is going to be your sustain race. That's the one where it's going to be the easiest to not run out of magicka. It's going to do slightly less damage as a result, but it's also just a fantastic race for solo if you want to go that route. Highly recommend it. For the Mundus, you're going to go ahead and take Lover Mundus while soloing, and then slap that Thief Mundus on. Go hit that Thief Stone when you're going to be getting into group content as your main form of content. But until then, Lover is going to be great for you. As for the attributes, you're going to put all 64 points into magicka. The more magicka you have, the more damage you do. So we're going to pump the magicka real hard and take advantage of that formula. As for the consumables, we're going to use Ghastly Eyeball for the food. This is going to give you 5,000 max magicka as well as about 500 mag recovery, right? So it's giving you tons of mag, which means it's giving you tons of damage. And then it's also giving you massive recovery so that you don't run out. If you feel like you're a little bit low on health with this food, you can go ahead and use Witch Mother's Potent Brew. It's going to give you a little bit of health and a little bit less mag and mag recovery. As for your potions, you're going to go ahead and use Essence of Magicka, the basic potions that fall off of enemy mobs. You can buy them at guild traders for next to nothing. You can get them off of mobs when you kill them. They're very, very cheap, and they're good to get in the habit of using. These are great to learn how to play the game on. Potions are really, really important in ESO. So is food. You do not play this game without those things. If you're playing ESO without food or potions, well, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Because you're doing substantially less damage. You're going to be running out of magicka all the time, and it's just going to feel bad. And the combat's going to feel bad. So let's prevent that. Go ahead and use these potions. The basic ones are nice for easy content, and then Essence of Spell Power potions. Go ahead and spring for these. They're a bit pricey, so don't use them unless you're doing something hard, like maybe soloing a veteran arena for the first time, like Maelstrom Arena or Vodashon Hollows, or maybe you're jumping into some veteran group content, right? And you really want to bring your all for the team. That's a great time to use these Essence of Spell Power potions, and you will want to do that because these things are giving you 20% increased weapon and spell damage. 20% is huge, right? That's not a small buff to your damage. They're also going to give you increased crit chance on top of that, and they're going to give you a ton of magic recovery as well as a flat boost to your mag pool. You know, 7,000 mag when you press the button. Really good for you. As for Vampire and Werewolf, we're not going to go either of those things. I mean, you could mess around with Vampire. I wouldn't really recommend going Werewolf on a mag build. Maybe a stand build, you could work that in, but not really needed in a mag build and not really helpful either. All right, now let's dive into the meat of the build, the gear and the skills. Okay, so first up for the gear, I'm going to give you 3 different loadouts. One for players that don't have access to DLC content. So this is base game players, and it's also great for starter gear for everybody because it's real easy to get. And then I'll give you a loadout for people that are willing to do dungeons, and then I'll give you a loadout for people that are willing to do trials, although the trial gear is in no way needed for this build. It's just going to make you a little bit stronger if you're willing to go out there and get it. So for the base game loadout, you're going to be picking up Briarheart to wear on the weapons and jewelry, and Order's Wrath to be wearing on the body. And for the monster set, you can use Stormfist. Briarheart is going to be giving you lots of extra weapon and spell damage. Order's Wrath is going to give you lots of crit chance, crit damage, that sort of thing. And Stormfist is going to give you a massive damage proc and a little bit of stamina regen, which does come in handy with this build. If you're willing to do dungeons, then what I'll recommend is Pillar of Nirn. Once you're willing to do dungeons and get into DLC content, I'm going to go ahead and recommend the Maelstrom Staff on the back bar. This is going to buff the damage that your Wall of Elements is putting out. I'm also going to recommend Pillar of Nirn on the front bar weapon and jewelry. And then finally on the body, Auroran's Thunder. This is a very nice, underrated light armor set that does really good damage and has great stats on it. And then for the monster set, we're going to go ahead and slap Magma Incarnate on the shoulder. And you're going to go ahead and put Ring of the Pale Order. And when you're able to, go ahead and grab that Ring of the Pale Order for the infinite life leech that it's going to be providing you. That's going to be a massive increase to your survivability. Definitely take advantage of that. If you're kind of curious about how all this gear is loaded out on your character, what pieces go where, what traits, what's enchants, definitely check out the written guide. It has all of that for you, nice and easy to see. Next, for the people willing to go to trials, then just go ahead and replace Auroran's Thunder with Whirl of the Depths, and now you have the trial loadout on. Whirl of the Depths does really massive proc damage, just like Pillar of Nirn. They both do really massive damage on their own, just as sets, and they do a good job of amplifying the damage that you're putting out as well. All right, next up, let's dive into the skills. All right, for the first skill, we're going to go with Purifying Light. Purifying Light is going to be a 6-second dot that you put on the enemy. So you're going to have to check on this one pretty often because it's a very short time. So you're going to be reapplying this a lot, but it's going to do a lot of damage for you. It's going to do more damage the more damage you do to the enemy. So this is kind of the last dot you put on the enemy. You get all your dots ticking and then you put this thing down. And because all of the other dots are ticking and doing damage for the 6 seconds that this is on the enemy, when it explodes, it's going to hit really hard because the more damage the enemy takes while this dot is on them, the more damage the explosion at the end. That's the easiest way to explain it. And then next, we've got Puncturing Sweep. Puncturing Sweep is the bread and the butter for the Magicka Templar. This is a great skill. It's going to hit the enemy 3 times, and each time it's going to do really solid damage. Plus, it's going to slow their move speed by 40%, and it's also going to heal you for 33% of the damage you do with it. So this skill is a damage dealing ability and it's a healing ability. And this is why this class is so nice and easy for new players to pick up, because even if all you're doing is using this skill, you're going to be putting out solid damage and you're going to be staying alive. And that's half the battle in ESO. This skill is channeled, so you can't block and cast it at the same time. So if you see a really heavy attack incoming that you want to block, make sure you right click and cancel the cast of your Puncturing Sweep. Next, we've got Radiant Glory, one of the coolest executes in the entire game. What this is going to do is it's going to create a beam of fire that connects from your hand to the enemy, dealing massive damage. Starting at 40%, you're going to want to start using this on the enemy while keeping your dots up. So you keep your dots up and you'll start using this instead of your Puncturing Sweeps. And then as you get closer to like 15% health, you're pretty much only going to be using this ability. Really cool thing about Radiant Glory as an execute, not only does it do a massive amount of damage, but it also heals you for 20% of the damage it's inflicting. So you've got so many heals coming in from your Purifying Light, from your Radiant Glory, right? And from some other things that we'll talk about, plus your Ring of the Pale Order. Very nice for keeping you alive and really massive damage. Solar Barrage. This is one of the abilities that was changed this patch, and so we had to add it to the build because it's a really powerful change. It's going to conjure solar energy that's going to blast enemies around you, doing damage every 2 seconds. Great. So it's a nice dot. But the nicest thing about it is it's also going to increase the damage of all of your class abilities by 5% for 22 seconds when you use this ability. So that's a massive buff to all of your class abilities, and it's what was changed about this ability and why we have to use it now, and we're happy to do so. It's a very nice skill. Next, we've got Barb Trap. Barb Trap, you know what it is, right? It's an incredibly powerful ability. If you've followed one of my builds before, you know how incredibly valuable this skill is right now. It's giving you Minor Force, which is increasing your critical damage. It's one of the strongest single target dots in the game. It is also a Fighters Guild ability, so it's giving you all of the Fighters Guild passives. Really nice ability to have on your bar. And it's a nice way to also put some of the resource load on your stamina, as opposed to having everything on mag and then having problems keeping up with your mag sustain. Next, we've got Flawless Dawnbreaker. You've got 2 ults in ESO at all the times, right? You've always got 2 ults, one on the front bar, one on the back bar, and we generally use the front bar ultimate as a bar buffer, which means since we're only ever going to use our best ultimate, there's really no reason to have 2 ults in ESO generally, like 99% of the time, especially for DPS, right? You're just going to use the ult that does the most damage, period. So the front bar one, what we do is, since we're doing all of our damage on the front bar, we're going to use a front bar ultimate that's going to make these abilities on the front bar hit harder. It's going to be a bar buffer. Some skills have passives attached to them, like just by putting it on the bar, it increases the damage of that bar, right? So that's what we do. We put Flawless Dawnbreaker here, and it's going to increase the damage of this bar by increasing our weapon and spell damage by 3%. It's also going to give us increased ult regen by giving us ult regen every time we kill an enemy, right? So it's doing a lot of nice little things there. Very useful to have just slotted, even though we're not going to use it. It is a decent ultimate when you do use it. It's going to do nice burst damage, plus it's going to increase your weapon and spell damage by 300 for 20 seconds. So in a pinch, like if you only have 119 ultimate and you want to use this thing, go for it. It's not a big deal. It's not that bad. All right, now for the back bar. On the first skill, we've got Unstable Wall of Fire. This is the one that you are using. It pairs really nice with your Maelstrom Staff. So the Maelstrom Staff is causing this big rectangle of fire to do even more damage than it already was. If you recast this ability, it explodes. So if you walk up to a pack of really weak enemies, you can just cast this a few times and it will kill all of them. Play around with that. Give it a try. It feels really good, but you have to get it upgraded to Unstable Wall of Fire before it will explode like that. Next, we've got Blazing Spear. Blazing Spear is also a really nice, massive AoE ability. It also is it's got some upfront punch to it too. So it's kind of got two phases of damage. One, when the spear lands and hits and it hurts all the enemies pretty bad. And then the second phase is a dot that lasts 10 seconds. It's great damage, and it's also really good for your allies. It's going to cause them to get resources back, a lot of resources back when they grab this energy for this spear. So it's good for you. It's good for allies. It's just a great ability, and it does amazing damage. And also, if you're fighting more than 4 enemies at a time, it's not like a bad ability to spam. So you could throw your Wall of Elements down under things and then throw the spear a few times, because of that upfront punch is really solid for a big AoE skill. The next ability on the back bar is going to be Dampen Magic. This is your survival ability. Like if you are taking damage, but you're not attacking anything, right? Because your primary form of healing on this build is by killing, right? If you puncturing sweep an enemy, that brings health back, both from the skill and from your Ring of Pelleter. If you're using your execute on somebody, that's healing you, both from the skill and from the Ring of the Pelleter, right? So you got a lot of skills that are healing you, but they require you to be attacking an enemy. So sometimes you'll be running from an enemy, or you'll be running to an enemy, and you'll be taking damage and your life will be dropping, and you just need a bit of time so you can unload some damage on them to get your health back full. And you'll see me doing that in the video that's playing here, the footage of me running through Vodastron Hollows. You'll see me pop the shield whenever I feel like, you know, my health's getting a little low, and I let my health get really low a lot. You'll see it happen a lot because I'm very comfortable with the MagPlar and all the health regen that comes. You may want to use Dampen Magic. You might want to weave it a little more often than I do until you get used to seeing your health bounce around that much. Next, we've got Razor Caltrops. Razor Caltrops is fantastic because it's a nice, massive AoE dot. It's doing pretty solid damage, and it's also applying major breach to all the enemies in it, which means their resistances are being reduced by 6,000. If you're not familiar with how all that works, don't worry, that's not a big deal. All you need to know is that just means they're going to take way more damage from you because you have this. And when you don't have this debuff on the enemy, they take way less damage from you. So it's a pretty important debuff to have in AoE form or in single target form, at least somewhere in your kit, especially while soloing. In group content, somebody in your group, like your tank or your healer, is responsible for bringing it, not the DPS. But when you're soloing, you've got to provide it yourself because the tank and the healer aren't there. Next, we've got Ritual of Retribution. This is a really cool ability. It's a massive AoE dot, right? And it lasts 20 seconds. So it's 12 meters AoE and it lasts 20 seconds. And basically the way it works is you put it down and every 2 seconds it does damage, but it also increases by 12% each tick. So each tick does 12% more damage than the previous tick until the final ticks of this thing are hitting really hard. So this is one of those abilities where you want to let it expire all the way because you want that last tick that hits the hardest to hit before you reapply this skill. You never want to reapply this one early. So make sure you turn your timers on so you can see how much time is left on an ability, and make sure you're not recasting this one early. Finally, our backbar ultimate, the ultimate that we're going to be using to do our big damage. This ultimate's a lot of fun for a few reasons. One, it's a shooting freaking star, right? Which is just plain awesome. It looks really cool when you use it. It also does an insane amount of damage, both impact damage when it hits and plus a nice little dot that it leaves there for 13 seconds after it hits. Plus, for each enemy that you hit with it, you get 12 ultimate, right? So it is very possible to cast this on a big group of enemies and then instantly have like enough ult charge to cast it again, right? So it's very nice if you can try to hit multiple enemies with it, and it's just going to make it so that you have it back again even sooner. Really fun ability. All right, now let's go over the rotation. First thing we're going to do on this is start by preloading our Solar Barrage. We're just going to get that ticking, and then we're going to lead into the enemy with Unstable Wall of Fire, Blazing Spear, Razor Caltrops, and Ritual of Retribution. We're just going to go ahead and throw all of those back bar dots down, 3 of which are 10-second dots. So when you apply one of these, you're going to be applying all of them. Then we're going to come to the front bar and we're going to throw down our Purifying Light and our Barbed Trap. Now all of our dots are ticking and we can start puncturing sweeping away. When one of those dots falls off, you're going to stop puncturing your sweeping and then you're just going to start reapplying them. When the enemy gets down below around 40% health, you're going to stop puncturing your sweeps and then you're going to start using Radiant Glory instead. Okay, so replace puncturing sweep with Radiant Glory around 40%, right? While maintaining all of the dots and your buffs and everything that's going, just keep them ticking. And then around like 15%, you can start letting most of that stuff fall off. Maybe just keep up your Razor Caltrops and your Barb Trap and your Wall of Fire, because these are all giving you buffs and debuffs and stuff like that. So those 3 you'll probably want to keep all the way to 0, but the rest you can probably start letting fall off. It's not a big deal. And that sums it up for the rotation. So now let's talk about the Templar passives. So we've got Piercing Spear. So anytime we have an Adric Spear ability slotted, we get 10% extra critical damage. The reason that's important is this is why we usually want to have at least one of these abilities on each bar. So that's why I said we have one on the front bar already with our jabs. And then on the back bar, we would have it from Radial Sweep. But it just turns out right now that the damage difference between Radial Sweep back here and Flawless Dawnbreaker, it's not a huge deal. So you can pick, you can go either way and you're going to be great. The second passive is Spear Wall. This says we gain minor protection for 6 seconds, reducing damage taken by 5%. So anytime we activate an Adric Spear ability, we get minor protection, reducing incoming damage by 5%. So you pair that 5% damage reduction, which is huge in ESO, by the way, with our major and minor resolve. That's 9,000 resistances. You can see why this build is starting to feel real tanky. We've got Burning Light. When you deal damage, you generate a stack of Burning Light for 3 seconds. After reaching 4 stacks, you deal 3,500 magic damage to your enemy. This effect stacks once every half second. So you'll be beating on your enemy and then they'll randomly explode. Like you'll definitely see this damage kind of boom out of you. And if you're wondering why you randomly like explode like a substantial damage tick, it's this ability right here. It's this passive that you don't even have to worry about. It's just happening. Every 4th tick of damage you do to your enemy is going to kind of let out this explosion on them. Next, we have Dawn's Wrath line. Dawn's Wrath is going to have Prism. Prism is going to give us ult regen back every time we use a Dawn's Wrath abilities. And this can occur once every 6 seconds. So it's just a nice little form of ult regen. Just about every class has something like this where you use a certain ability and you get a little bit of ult, right? Kind of encouraging you to use class abilities, really saying like, hey, don't forget to use like these abilities. Well, this can fire every 6 seconds. This lasts 6 seconds. So you're getting 3 ult regen every 6 seconds with that. Illuminate. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability grants minor sorcery to you and your group for 20 seconds, increasing your spell damage by 10%. This is not a big deal. It's, you know, it's fine. It's whatever. We don't really need this because we're a weapon damage build. Next, we have Restoring Spirit. Reduces the health, magic, and stamina and ultimate costs of our abilities by 5%. This just means that our ultimates are a little bit cheaper on the Templar, just a little bit. It's 5%. It's not a big number like on some other classes, but it's nice. Then we have Restoring Light. Restoring Light says, in the passives, increases our healing effects from our Restoring Light abilities by up to 12% in proportion to the severity of our wounds. So when these abilities are healing us, they heal us even more when we're lower in health, when we need it the most. Sacred Ground, while standing in your own cleansing ritual, Rune Focus, or Rite of Passage, right? Which we will be doing. And for 4 seconds after leaving it, you get minor mending, increasing your healing down by 8%. Not a big deal. You just an extra 8% healing. It's not something you're ever going to think about or focus on, so don't stress about this one. And then we have Lightweaver next. When you heal an ally under 50% health with Restoring Light ability, you grant them 2 ultimate. So this is nice if you happen to throw down an ability that heals some allies, then boom, you've got this passive, you know, giving them extra ult. That's nice. Although it's going to be pretty rare that it's doing anything, and you can skip it if you're soloing. Next, we have Master Ritualist, increased resurrection speed by 20%, and resurrected allies return with 100% more health. This is so great in group content, man. It's always so nice when a Templar comes over to res you, because you know he's going to be able to get that thing off. He's going to be able to res so fast, and it gives you a 50% chance to fill an empty soul gem when you resurrect, which, you know, hey, that's nice. It's not a big deal. It's not something you're going to celebrate very often, but hey, that's cool. It's something. All right, next up, let's talk about those weapon passives, okay? We're going to grab dual wield, and final passive here is why we're using daggers, right? Each dagger we wear gives us crit chance, whereas maces would give penetration. That crit chance just happens to be the best path to damage in this game right now. So we take 2 daggers. Grab all of these. They're going to increase your damage. Both dual wield abilities and as well as all of your abilities. And don't worry if it says it only buffs dual wield abilities. That applies to light and heavy attacks. Those are counted as dual wield abilities. So get all the buffs, right? Get all the passives. Next, for Fighters Guild, grab the first 4 passives. You can ignore the last one, that's an RP passive, but the first one is going to give you the ability to persuade enemies, which is more RP. That's great though, it is nice to have. For battle, it gives us reduced stamina cost of our Fighters Guild abilities. So our ultimate is cheaper if we're deciding to use the Fighters Guild ultimate, as well as our Barb Trap, which is great. Increases our weapon and spell damage by 3% for each ability slotted. This is why we are going to have 2 Fighters Guild abilities on the front bar, right? That means we're getting 6% increased weapon damage just by having them slotted. We're doing 6% more weapon damage to all of our abilities, everything we're doing on the front bar all the time. Feels good. The third one is huge, Banish the Wicked. This is another reason we always want to have at least 1 Fighters Guild ability on the bar. That is Banish the Wicked. You generate 3 ultimate for whenever you kill an enemy. That's so good for getting your ultimate back, right? So gotta have it. Then we have Skilled Tracker. Your Fighter Skilled abilities deal an extra 10% damage. Pretty straightforward. That's good. Next, you're going to take all of the Undaunted passives. These are going to give you extra life for each type of armor, extra magic for each time armor you wear, and extra stamina, right? So it gives you more resources. And then it also, every time you grab a synergy, you're going to get resources back. So you always want to have both of these passives on every build. Under Assault, we're going to grab Continuous Attack. This is going to make it so you run 30% faster all the time. If you don't know how to get this, make sure you watch my complete leveling guide linked in the description down below. It's a 1 to 300 guide, and one of the things it tells you early in that video is how to get continuous attack so that you move 30% faster all the time when you're on your mount. It's a huge difference, and if you do it the way I tell you, you don't have to do 1 second of PvP, which is great for most people. Next, we're going to grab all of our racial passives because they're usually pretty substantial. And hopefully you picked a race that is conducive to what you're trying to do in this game. If you didn't, don't worry. Race cannot make or break a character, but it can certainly help. Lastly, under Alchemy, we're going to take Medicinal Use and we're going to max that baby out, get it to level 3. Medicinal Use increases the length of your potions, so your potions will last as long as the cooldown. Cooldown on a potion is 45 seconds. By default, potions last like 32, 35 seconds, something like that. So that would mean you had like a 25% downtime on those potions if you don't max out medicinal use. That's 25% downtime on your endurance. On this build, it would also be your savagery, right? So less crit chance 25% of the time, less sustain 25% of the time. That's bad for your damage. So you want this on every class, every build. You always want medicinal use. It's really powerful because potions are powerful and it makes them last the full duration of the cooldown so that you can have 100% uptime on those potions. With this buff, potions last actually 47 seconds. So 2 seconds longer than the potion cooldown. So you can have over 100% uptime, right? If such a thing was possible. You can have 100% uptime very easily. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, if you found it helpful, please give it a like and a thumbs up and a comment and all that good stuff for the algorithm. YouTube loves it when you guys do that, and so do I. If you really want to support the channel in a big way, become a YouTube member. There's a link to become a member down in the description below. Join and you get things like behind the scenes footage, you get a unique Discord channel that only the members have access to, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So it's just something you guys can do if you want to support the channel. If you're not, no big deal. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. If you're not sure what to do next, maybe watch one of the videos popping up on screen right now.